Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
A special meeting on an out of ordinary date, Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. And public comments. Do we have any? Who's Zaid Van Giffen?
And he is one of our parents.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a parent at Southshire.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Deb Lemaire.
Teacher at Southshire.
Okay. And Colleen is here from Southshire. Chris Callahan's here from Southshire. All right. No one's offering a comment and waving their hands. So we'll go to the finance report, treasurer's report.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, not a lot for the treasurer's report. Mary and I completed the final rec between the state, the village, and the graded school district. So that is reflected in the May report. The ending cash balance is a little over 156,000. That's really it for the report. I'll save the line of credit items once we jump down there. Mary, do we have anything for the budget status report from May?
Where's Mary?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I have not seen the budget status.
You're gonna have to get closer, Mary.
I haven't seen the budget status report since I stopped getting the packets. So Doug, when you get back from vacation, we can take a look at that. We will need that in order to do the final reconciliation of the repair and maintenance special reserve fund. And that's the last item that I'm waiting for to transition over to Doug.
Okay. For the line of credit, Mary and I met on Saturday. We've begun the process with People's Bank. It appears that the amount that was used for the last 2 years, which was the 350,000, is going to be the same amount for this year. We have begun the process of the paperwork with People's Bank. Alice from SVSU provided the audit report that was needed. Mary and I worked on the cash flow worksheet. We're answering questions for People's as we speak. A couple of just questions regarding the revenue. So we're just ironing those details out with them. I do have a little bit of language. So Ray, once you're ready for somebody to make a motion to approve that, I'll let Lori know what the language is to satisfy People's. There's a couple of things that we have to put in there because of their transition to M&T Bank, and to keep it so that the entire board doesn't have to sign all of the documents. It can be authorized through the chair, but there just has to be certain language in the minutes and in the minutes for them.
Okay, so you want to go to that now?
Sure, that's fine. Absolutely.
We usually don't go through the budget status report.
Okay. Yep. I'm getting used to everything and just clicking down the item list.
No, it's only there in case someone needs to or thinks we need to examine it.
Okay. Sounds good. So whoever is going to make the motion, what we need to do is the board, somebody will make a motion to approve the tax anticipation note in the amount of $350,000. That will be from People's, a division of M&T Bank. The full board approves the board chairman, Raymond Milano, along with treasurer Doug Bugey, to sign all documents necessary to complete the tax anticipation note. The
Okay.
clerk will sign the necessary paper as the clerk certifying the minutes.
Okay. We need to make sure that that's stated as a line of credit and not a tax anticipation note, because it's different. That we're actually getting a line of credit, not a tax anticipation.
Sorry, yes, yes.
Okay, so you seem to state it pretty well, so I'll make a motion that we adopt your language there for a resolution to approve the board chair, Ray Molyneux, as signature to agree to the line of credit for the board, for the district.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All in favor, signify
Aye.
saying aye. Aye. That's all of us. So we've approved the board chair to sign the line of credit paperwork for FY 2023. And I have a third element there, set up a meeting to sign the LLC. That's basically between, now that will be between me and Doug and Mary.
Correct. Yep.
I put on there authorized bond payment for July 2022. That's actually separate from the line of credit. I don't know if we, well, it will occur in the new fiscal year, but basically we have to do it, so we pay it every year, paying off the balance of our bond from 2011. I would, I guess what I'm looking for is for the board to note that it's authorizing that bond payment, which is authorizing the treasurer to make that payment. I believe you're going to do it through automated clearinghouse arrangement.
Yes, we set up a wire transfer. Mary and I will likely go in the last day of June so that the payment goes out for July 1st.
Right. So we need, what I'm looking for is, I guess I'll just state it, a motion to authorize the treasurer of the district to send an automated clearinghouse payment for our bond interest, basically. Is it interest in principal? It's the principal later.
Yes. It's
interest
both.
in principal for 2011.
And it is a wire transfer, which is slightly different than an ACH.
Okay, so you're using a wire transfer? I thought,
yes.
I think Jim Kosa said something about an ACH, but
he may have, but we do it as a wire transfer.
So which is it, or should I be more generic?
No, I mean, it's still an automated payment, but it will be a wire transfer.
Okay. All right, so we'll change that wording from ACH to a wire payment to pay our principal and interest on the board, the district's 2011 bond.
No, I'll make a motion if you want, Ray.
Yep. Well, okay, thanks. That's I'm making the motion, you're making the second.
Second with it.
All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. That's all of us, I believe.
Aye. Yep.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which includes get to it, minutes from May 11th and current warrants, which, where were the warrants? Actually didn't I didn't see warrants on the website. I downloaded everything.
So the warrant looks like for payroll, and then
Right.
Payment to Lori for last month.
There's payments to the treasurers.
Building repairs, and then the alarm panel deposit.
Payments for minutes and building repairs that we agreed to pay as a landlord's responsibility. That amounted to $7,644 in effect. And they're basically a lot of it is consumed by monitoring and testing and inspection of basic equipment of the building, such as the fire alarm, the sprinkler system, the elevator, and in addition, there is an annual fire extinguisher inspection. And then there's an expense for declogging the sewer line, 1 point. There is one expense that I deducted from the transactions that were submitted to me because I couldn't remember what it was about. So I would, that $170.64 I would pay or ask to have paid if I can get documentation for it from Village School. I wasn't sure what it was. I think I knew during the meeting that we had on these expenses, and I totally forgot when it came to sending them off to Jim, and so I couldn't vouch for it. And that's all in the warrant. It's not a very large warrant, but that's the end of the year because we have no further tuition payments to make, and we're not yet paying anything for expenses of the building that we will need to deal with over the summer. So minutes from last May 11th and the warrant in the amount of $19,001.49 for June 14th, 2022. And that includes payroll warrant to our treasurers and the taxes on their salaries, and payment to Lori for minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I will second that motion to accept the consent agenda.
Thanks. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's all of us. Now we can move to policies. There's two to warn, and two to adopt. So we'll deal with the warnings first. The 5510 equity policy. I will make a motion that we adopt it. If we get a second here from Karen.
Actually, the 5510 is to warn.
Yes, I said it's, sorry, I did say adopt. I meant warn. I said warn. So if we have a second, then I'll call the question.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Karen. All in favor of warning the 5510 equity policy?
Aye.
Aye by saying, raising your hand, saying aye. Thanks. That's all of us. Warning 5520 transgender non-conforming students. So I will make a motion that we warn it.
I'll second that one as well.
Thank you. All in favor of warning 5520 transgender non-conforming students?
Aye.
Thank you. Kim is putting her fist up, I guess. Adopting 5003 prevention of sexual harassment. I will move that we adopt 5003 prevention of sexual harassment, a lengthy policy with a very large amount of legal language in it.
I'll second that as well.
All right. All in favor of adopting policy 5003 prevention of sexual harassment?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's all of us. 5009 interrogation or searches of students by law enforcement or other agencies. This is to adopt. I will make a motion that we adopt it.
I'll second that one as well.
Thank you, Kiernan. All in favor of adopting 5090? I said 09, I meant 5090, excuse me. Interrogation or searches of students by law enforcement or other agencies.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're done with policies. Now, I asked the SVSU attorney, Dina Atwood, to be present and to give us a presentation on two different items. One is the new Vermont Board of Education independent school rules for payment of public tuition. The second area I asked her to comment on was legislation passed by the state legislature, and at least most of it's been signed. I don't know if all of it's signed by the governor. And just to update us on the rules of the new rules on independent schools are, I think, are important for us to know because they may affect our operations for the coming year. And I invited Colleen, and obviously there are other members other persons here who are part of South Shire in some way. And I thought, I don't see her here, but I thought Meg Cottam was going to come. Is it?
Yeah.
Is she here?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. From Highland Hall to hear what Dina has to say about those rules. And I'll turn it over to Dina, if she's ready.
It's not my first Zoom. You would think I'd hit the unmute button. Thank you. Laura, can you share, or Jim, could you?
I will. You want to share your screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. You good?
You're good? All right. So if I do that, you all can see. Can you all see the?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I did it by slides. I'm going to run through it because I don't want to take a lot of your valuable time. The largest part of this, and Ray, I can send this to you if you want it, if you think it would be helpful. The largest part is talking about the series of rules, the 2200 rules, which are the independent school rules. the rules have some parts of the rules went into effect on May 10th, and some parts are going into effect next year on July 1st. So there still is a distinction between recognized independent school that is different from absolutely the representative schools that are here than from an approved independent school. They are maintaining the ability to have either of those. A recognized independent school cannot receive public tuition. Their standards are not as high and as comprehensive as an approved independent school. The rule does break out, and it predominantly is fixated on the provision and delivery of special education services, which does not start until July 1st, 2023, the new rules on that. It does bifurcate out based upon whether or not an approved independent school is going to do the delivery of special education services or not, implicates whether or not they can receive public funds from tuition. Currently, right now, in order for an approved independent school, excuse me, under the modified rules 2200, the way that an approved independent school can receive public funds is that they have to follow the procedures in the rule that is effective as of May 10th. There's part of the rule that talks about tuition from public funds that is a later enactment dated July 1st. The application, the approval process that are in the new rule are effective this year. The delivery of special education services, as you see, I pointed out, is starting for July 1st, 2023. The procedure rule lays out the procedure for seeking approval. It does provide for complaints and investigations. Schools can be placed on probation by the secretary, and they can then appeal it to the State Board of Education if they want to. The secretary is granted the ability to informally try and resolve complaints and also open up formal investigations. But there are some complaints that don't go to the secretary. It's drug, alcohol, DCF mandated reporting, safety of facilities, water supply, plumbing. They probably also would say building code issues don't go to them. They are very concerned about fire codes. They maintain their focus on fire codes as well. For the North Bennington board, one of the things to point out, because you do have students who go, I believe, across state lines, the rules do not and cannot require that non-Vermont schools adhere to the requirements around the special education capacity, which go into effect next year, because those schools have their own state law requirements. The non-Vermont school, I'm sorry?
I don't believe we've ever had a student who's attended across state lines. So.
Oh, okay. That's, considering you kind of have two that are close to you, state lines, that's pretty incredible. But that says what your independent schools are within your own area. Right. So non-Vermont schools.
I'm so sorry, Ray, don't we have Pine Cobbles across line?
We have had in the past, but we don't currently have anyone attending Pine Cobble. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So those schools still, yeah, those schools, if somebody goes across the line to Massachusetts or if they go to New York, those schools have to be approved under the laws of the state they're in or the country they're located in. So it would be under the laws of the state that they're in. That remains, that's what's happening now for students who attend non-Vermont independent schools. There is the reciprocity is, and this is dealing with those schools that are not within Vermont. The approval can be granted without committee evaluation and approval if they can demonstrate that they're accredited by a state or regional agency recognized by the State Board of Ed. Tuition from public funds is one of the ones that changes on July 1st. This is, you know, in order to lay it out, that the tuition cannot be paid unless the school satisfies the application, the approval one, and the approval to receive public tuition, special education tuition, which again is pushed off. There is currently a waiver process that is under the current rules, and it's remaining, which is the secretary approves an exception for placement in an independent school, and that is typically only used for a student who may be receiving special services, special education. There also remains the fact that under a due process for special education, a hearing officer may in fact rule that a student who is placed typically unilaterally by parents in a non-approved school, if it's working for the student, you may have a hearing officer who issues an order that says that that's an appropriate placement. You would still be required at that point to pay for it. The application for approval requires that independent schools, and this is one of the ones which is as of May 10th in place, that the independent school must demonstrate for their initial approval or the renewal that they substantially comply with all statutory requirements for approved independent schools, and they have to document the following. They need to have a statement of non-discrimination that needs to be posted on your school's website. It needs to be included in your school's application materials, and your statement of non-discrimination has to be consistent with Vermont Public Accommodations Act. You also have requirements for Vermont Fair Employment Practices Act as well. And Title 21 covers labor. So I'm going to generally say, although I'm not giving legal advice to any of the independent schools, you probably want to talk to whoever helps you out on having your statements of non-discrimination up on your website and as part of your application materials, because this part of the law, as I said, went into effect as of May 10th. You don't necessarily need to provide it to the State Board of Ed or to the secretary until you're going for your renewal. I would tell you it wouldn't hurt for you, in my estimation, to have it up on your website. You will also be required when you go to do your renewal to have an assurance signed by the head of the school that the school complies with Vermont Public Accommodation Act in all aspects of the school's admission and operations. And farther on in the rule, and interestingly enough, they put it under the special ed part, they do clearly outline that they're talking about all aspects of the Public Accommodations Act, not just about kids with disabilities. So they're talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic, all of the things that are covered under the Public Accommodations Act. A school also has to document, among other things, a description of their physical facilities. That's the fire code stuff too. You have to, in your renewal process, it lays out that they have to provide their enrollment, how they are, and how specifically the school is designed to serve children with disabilities. Their governance, faculty, there are a lot of rules about that. A description of curriculum, methods of instruction, evaluation process, and special education services that the independent school has designed to achieve its educational objectives and provide a minimum course of study. Because remember, as of July 1st, 2023, if an independent school is not going to fulfill the part of the rule regarding special education, that closes the door to receiving public funds. So again, a part of the approval process is that the state board has to find that the independent school substantially complies with all of the statutory requirements, the board's rules for approved schools, including, again, non-discrimination in admission and operations and requirements. relative to its facilities, fire drills, and you also have to keep track of the immunization of the students against disease. The non-discrimination in admissions, it comes up in the special ed rule, and it talks about it basically, in fact, that students, as of July 1st, 2023, it's almost a blind admission process initially, which is that the student would be enrolled, and then the discussion, I think it's provisionally enrolled, then the discussion is that the IEP team would be meeting, and then there would be the discussion whether or not the independent school thought that it had the ability to, in fact, serve the student. Whether or not, in order to serve the student, there are a couple ways that services can be provided. They can contract, the SU can provide it. They can contract with vendors. They can have their own in-house. And there's a whole process regarding that. As I'm sure most of you are aware, when they went through the rule making on this, the focus was to a large degree about trying to tie in the receipt of public tuition dollars to being inclusionary for students with disabilities. The school also has to demonstrate as part of its application process and its renewal process that it has the available supports necessary to meet the requirements of a minimum course of study. You have to have library services, administrative services, guidance and counseling services, and a system of records by which student progress can be assessed. As I keep saying, the special education one, I say it's delayed. I think it was to make sure that independent schools could thoughtfully think about if they were going to address it by how they were going to address this by increasing internal capacity or having conversations with public schools, SUs around them about how things would be managed in terms of whether or not, trying to find vendors, whether or not trying to come to an agreement with the SU that the SU would send staff. But for the upcoming school year, the rules that you're operating under are the same for special ed kids. So in particular, you have a couple schools that have not sought special ed approval through the State Board of Education. The Village School is approved in all 12 categories. So there's no problem with kids going there, but the same limitations are going to exist for this upcoming school year because the special ed rules don't go into effect about July 1st, 2023. As of July 1st, 2023, each approved independent school has to publish, maintain, and follow a written enrollment policy. And I'm listing out on this. Any special, the policy shall provide that any special considerations or requirement for students' acceptance for enrollment, none of which should be based on or disadvantage a student based on their membership in a protected class, whether that's an actual or suspected disability or the student's socioeconomic status. I will say, although it doesn't necessarily impact on North Bennington, the example that they give is if you're a ski school, you can actually require that kids have skill skiing, right? That's not a protected class issue. The school has to have, the independent school has to have a process for making enrollment decisions when the number of applicants exceeds their capacity. That goes back to, I think it was St. Johnsbury one year, had so many applicants who were recipients of special education services that they in fact had wanted to stop accepting students. As I said, that the initial thing is that the initial point as of July 1st, 2023 under special education is that the student shall be accepted for enrollment in a non-discriminatory manner. And it has to be consistent with your written enrollment policy. So those are going to be very important for parents and for schools to see. for schools to have out there and for schools to see. Part of what goes into play July 1st, 2023 is a clear statement that not only about protecting students who may be receiving specialized instruction or special ed, but that no student shall be denied acceptance for enrollment on the basis of race, creed, color, national origin, marital status, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity, or any other classification protected by federal or state law. I suspect that the independent school representatives who are here today don't have a problem with that, and haven't had a problem and didn't necessarily need this put in there. But it's a very important shift. It's a very definitive statement by the State Board of Ed. And Ray, I know that probably raises some questions for you, which we could roll through probably at a different time, so I don't take up a lot of your time and I could roll through it for the board. But I think that's going to be one that's going to be that requirement under Rule 2229 may in fact make some schools close the door on taking public tuition.
Yep, might be.
And there is a whole process, and it's very laborious to go through about if the independent school believes they're not capable to serve the student. And it's an interactive process with the IEP team, the LEA representative who would be representing North Bennington. And it also provides for, ironically, and I don't think it's going to get invoked frequently, but it provides for a hearing process where the cost of the hearing officer is split between the independent school and the public school. And if the public school is going to contest and say to the independent school, no, you can serve this child. I think, unfortunately, what is going to come from that is that if an independent school can articulate what the limitations are for and the fact that they don't have the capacity to serve the specific individual child, that we're going to be looking at a different placement for the student. Independent schools can, under this process that I'm talking about, if they believe that they're not capable of serving the student and they go through the very laborious process of dealing with it, if in fact the student who, as I noted, is at the onset provisionally enrolled, if the decision is made is that independent school is not an appropriate placement, that does not close the door on the independent school from receiving public funds. So there is a fair amount of structured protection, maybe, and I say that being quite blunt about, I don't represent independent schools. I only represent public entities. But there is some protection that the Independent School Association was concerned about, because there very well may be a student that independent schools cannot serve, despite whether or not we agreed to send send people there, or whether or not they could get vendors to do it. It's not an easy process for an independent school to necessarily demonstrate that. It requires agreement of the LEA from the SU. But if there's agreement, or if it goes all the way through a hearing process, and the hearing officer agrees, the independent school is not required to enroll the student, and they can still receive public tuition dollars for other students. That's really the highlights of the 2200 series. There are some minor changes to distance learning schools. There's some minor changes to tutorial schools. I don't think those are going to impact. I think, quite frankly, the impact is going to be July 1st, 2023, when the special ed part of the rule goes into place. And the very clear statement there about non-discrimination, although I do believe that the current statement in the earlier part of the rule that talks about having to, in fact, comply with Vermont's public accommodations law, it potentially can cause some issues for some independent schools. The public accommodations law is not only about access giving in, but it's also about physical barriers. So I put that out there. What is not clear to me is that since there is a complaint process that can go to the secretary, and if there is a concern about a problem under the public access provision, if there's a belief that, or a complaint from a family about the public accommodations part, whether or not the complaint in fact goes to the secretary, or whether or not it's still limited to go to the Human Rights Commission or to other agencies. The rule has some drafting problems in my estimation. I know that's hard for you to believe, Ray, knowing me. But hey, it does. So I think that's really the bigger issue is, as I said, is when special ed's going to pop in, I think, into play. Because my recollection is, is that Southshire currently is, I don't believe, approved for the provision of special education services. I could be incorrect about that, and if I am, I apologize. So Southshire, if that is true, is going to have to make a decision about whether or not the ability to receive public funds is at the level that they need to make some modifications to probably how their curriculum and how their provision of services are. And I say that very generally, by the way.
Highland Hall is here as well.
I'm sorry?
Highland Hall is here as well.
Okay, right. I don't know if Highland Hall, okay, I don't know if Highland Hall is approved for special education currently, but they would fall in the same idea. You know, independent schools can make a determination that they don't want to open themselves up to providing special education, but that closes the door. If it's an across the board, not provide special education or admit students with disabilities, that closes the door to public school tuition. And so it's sort of and I don't make a judgment on it, but I guess it's sort of the carrot and the stick from the State Board of Ed to make it, as I said, more of an inclusionary model for kids. So I don't know if there are any questions about that. I sort of am running through it.
Yes, I actually have a question.
Sure.
So we've always accepted kids with special needs, always. And we've gone through that. We actually have requested SVSU to do a couple IEPs in our day so that we could meet the students' need, and we get services outside of SVSU because currently we can't get any services at all from SVSU. So it sounds like still contracting others and having parents go through independent sources, that's still viable. But in 23, we need to make sure that we can hit the 10. Sounds like the only thing to do is to make sure that we can hit the 12 expectations for special ed.
Yeah, currently, I'll just quickly say this. Currently, if your school is not approved for special education and a parent decides to go and enroll their student under the tuition issue, because you're not approved for special education, an IEP cannot place a student at your school unless there is the very limited waiver process, and that exists now, that will continue to exist. But under the waiver process, it would have to be demonstrated that, like, you're the only school that could, in fact, serve the student and their disability. And that is an incredibly high bar. So currently right now, and what will happen for the the future year here until 2023, until July 1st of 2023, is that parents who do place their students or enroll their students in independent schools that are currently not approved for special education, what happens is there may be a service plan, is what it's called. The problem with service plans is, one is that from a parent, I'll tell you from a parent's perspective what the problem is with a service plan. There's no legal obligation for a student to receive a service plan. There's not a lot of funding that falls under to be able to spend on services on a service plan. And sometimes in a district, if there's a very high need student, that one student could eat up the whole fund for the service plan. So how you've been handling it currently, you're going to be handling it going until July 1st, 2023. The part of the rule, and I didn't lay it out because it is very significant, the rule talks about, an independent school being able to provide services as of July 1st, 2023. And it gives, I believe it's 4 ways. And I think I'm only listening, you could provide it yourself. And I always forget what the 4th one is. The SU could make an agreement, the IEP team, that they're going to be sending people out, our staff going to your school. I could tell you that's going to be very difficult for almost every school district I deal with, because we have shortages about people and also time issues, and there are some other labor management. Or it's like you could go out and contract with a vendor, or we could go out and contract with the vendor. And then what it deals with is if you're taking that action in terms of the costs that you can then shift back to the SU, it's covered under that. I think that answers what you were asking.
It more than answered.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that was great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm going to roll through very quickly. There were a couple other education focused things that happened at the legislature.
One moment. Will you send the slides that you have to me?
I absolutely will. Okay. Yep, I can do that.
And I can forward those to Meg and to Colleen.
Yeah, and what I'm also going to do, Ray, is it's kind of difficult. I know you're also going to be surprised at me saying this with Cat TV here. It's also a little difficult finding the final rule on AOB's.
Yeah, I'd say so, because I couldn't find it.
So I will send you the link to it, or I will send you a PDF of it. Yeah. And that way everybody can have that.
Yep.
As well.
I can send it to Colleen and to Meg, because I do have their email addresses. And so if you just send it to me, I'll get it out to them.
Absolutely. I will do that.
You have a hand up, Chris.
Okay, so Chris Callahan wants to ask the question before we proceed, so I'll let him do that.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Dina. I guess my question is, we've been talking about tuition funding, but for special education services, would it be tuition and special education funding, IDA, for example?
Yeah, so if you have a student who's eligible for special ed, and when we're talking about July 1st, 2023, yeah, the special education costs are going to be also part of that, because what's going to happen is the IEP team, let's say everything is perfect, right? Southshire or one of the other schools, and I apologize, says, yep, we can serve this kid. The IEP team is going to meet. They're going to meet with a representative and teachers from the school the student's going to go to. They're going to develop an IEP. They'll implement it, and the LEA, which is North Bennington, is going to be responsible for the special ed costs as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any, but I'm not seeing the whole screen.
Nope, I don't see anymore.
Okay.
Okay. So Act 176 of 2022 has no bearing, I don't think, on you. But that's the one that talked about the organization of union school districts and unified union school districts. It blew it all out. You know, there are some nerdy things that are in it, but you know, they took a 4-provision statute section and it's like 18 pages now. So y'all don't want to know about that. This one also, because you don't have you don't operate a school, Act number 111 made changes to 16 PSA 1752, which deals with the suspension and discipline of teachers. And it also protects, I guess the NEA was upset or thought there was a problem that somehow school districts or SUs were disciplining teachers or other employees for testifying before the General Assembly. I have yet to talk to a superintendent who understood why that had to be added. This one, Ray, is it's gonna take some really deep dive into this one. 127 is your education funding. I am sure that Renee Gordon is absolutely thrilled with this. It's the one about the pupil weights and limits. It updates the pupil weights. It limits your increases to your homestead property tax over fiscal year 25-29. Suspends the excess spending penalty for fiscal year 24 through 29. And correspondingly, you don't have to do the special ballot language requirement. AOE has some
or excess spending, yes. Okay.
Right, correct. Yep. AOE has has a couple obligations under this law that they're going to not meet, and one of them is going to be probably the universal income declaration. They have to get it to you by July 1st next year.
Okay. This doesn't take into start until FY25, right?
Yeah, and yes, but what it does and where it's going to be painful for Renee is it's looking at, actually it's 175 is doing, yeah, it doesn't do it until FY25, but FY24, I think you have to start dealing with, I think doing the assessment on the pupil weights. I think that's why they have to get it to you by July 1st, 2023, because you have to give it, you have to give them.
In order to create your budget for 20.
Right. And by the way, they do set dates about when they're going to provide you the, the equalized pupil number. And I can guarantee you they won't meet that either. They have yet to meet it.
They barely meet it for budgets as they are now.
Yeah, I've had schools that haven't gotten it until June, and that's a little difficult.
So they did allocate some additional staffing.
Yes, they did. That right. Who knows if they'll actually hire or be able to find people.
Yeah. Okay.
It changes also the pupil weights on English learners, and it's very complicated. Your business office is going to hate this. But it also does provide additional categorical aids for districts with 25 or fewer English learners. 1 to 5, that's 25,000. 6 to 25, you get 50,000. So this is
a categorical grant instead of weighting, or
it's an addition to weighting.
Oh, addition. Okay.
And so they're doing it for the smaller, because they believe that English learners are going to have a more significant impact on the required services that will hit a smaller district.
So that's primarily oriented toward Burlington and where there's a lot of English learners, but it would impact other parts of the state too, depending on.
Yeah, Burlington.
Our immigrant status, yeah.
Right, I think Burlington, Rutland, and Winooski had some pretty big concerns about how English learners were going to be weighted.
I assume that this SU will have some of those as well, due to influx of Afghan refugees, perhaps.
Yep. So The education funding, it's wild. So I'm just giving you sort of the thumbnail sketch. Act 175, which is the one about the special ed funding. Your SU is going to choose to either use fiscal year 2018 to 2020 or fiscal year 2019 to 21 to calculate the special education census grant funding for FY23. You know, and it's an interesting choice because one has also the impact of the COVID pandemic in terms of how that's going to impact which one makes better sense for using. The Act 175 also delayed the implementation of the removal of adverse effect from the special education rules. It pushed it off to July 1st, 2023. Special ed directors across the state were very, very concerned about that. And it also creates an income-based education tax study committee because they would like to look at and study and make recommendations about whether or not they're going to replace the homestead property tax system with an income-based education tax system. There's some other things that are in the law, but
this is 173 under 173.
It's under 175.
5.
Yep. Okay. And yes. So how do I close that out?
Yeah, well, okay. What about the free meals legislation? What happened to that?
Universal.
Did the governor sign it? He did sign it reluctantly, right?
He did sign it reluctantly, and universal meals will be for the next year.
So that's FY23.
Yeah, I think that's correct, right, Renee? It's just for the next year.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, Jim. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, he was reluctant about it, but he did sign it. So
after that, after this coming year, if the legislature wants this continued, they're going to have to find ways of funding it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This year they're funding it from the monies from ARA.
Yes, they're funding it from the feds. Yeah, from the big amount windfall that they got from the feds.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I hope that kind of helped. Meg has a question. I saw a hand go up.
Thank you. Okay, Ray.
Yeah, go ahead, Meg.
Okay, so I want to come back, if I may, into Rule 2229, those provisions for special education. And so we're talking about the independent schools in this district serve elementary education, elementary grade children. And it's often not until they're enrolled in school that this process of identifying their need for special education services begins. So I'm curious about, I'm clear that the policies for approval need to be non-discriminatory and open to special education services. But that process in the past has been, in my experience, pretty cooperative, that a family initiates the desire for identifying the need for special education services. We work with the LEA to do that. And then there's something not quite black and white in the delivery of those services. It's not either all the independent school or the LEA. That's how it's been in the past. Kids can receive partial services at a public school of their district for certain things. So does this law and the enactment of this law in July 2023 change that kind of case by case, child by child kind of address of this issue?
So one is overall, the SU, so Southwest Vermont, for a student who is a resident of one of their towns, still has a requirement under the federal IDEA statute and regulations to do what's called child find. And they still have an obligation to evaluate a child. So in the manner, so it's a two-part answer. So in the part of what you brought up about, may not have been caught at the pediatrician, gets caught when they come to attend your school. That is still something that will remain where for the students that are residents of Southwest Vermont, where they will in fact do the evaluation or make the determination if an evaluation needs to be done. So there's that part. So that remains. What the rule as of July 1st, 2023 lays out, and I did also leave out one more part that I'll throw in there in the mix, is it lays out a little bit more the structure that of how those services in terms of your school is going to have representation on the IEP team. As a matter of fact, the IEP team very much so is going to consist of the teacher who's teaching the student. I'm sure you'll have a representative there. There'll be an LEA representative, and then it's going to be, if the student is receiving something like occupational therapy or physical therapy, the physical therapist will be there. All of those overarching requirements as to who participates in terms of who would be a member of the team are still going to exist because a federal law exists. In terms of the provision of service, that's going to be a discussion, quite frankly, between the SU special ed department and the SU, I guess, and also your school making decisions about how you're going to do. For example, I will tell you, Burton actually has special educators on staff, right? They actually, Burton is also bigger, right, than probably all of you guys. But so schools decide how they're going to handle it differently. The Village School is an independent school, and they're currently approved for all 12. And so there's a way of where the provision of special ed services, whether or not they're contracting with the SU, how that's working as a member district for North Bennington, but the Village School existing as a separate entity, that's all handled that way. It's going to be analogous to that. One of the other things that I didn't talk about is that there also has to be a written agreement about non-instructional services and things of that nature. So it's going to be a little bit more involved. You all are going to be having to work more. I don't want to say better, because I don't think there are any negatives in terms of what the interactions have been. You all are going to be collaborating. You're going to have to. People from your school and the representatives from the SU, and working through that. Because the point is, quite honestly, when you have tuitioning districts, there is a concern that students with disabilities there are issues of equity that people are concerned about. And so I think it'll be a good thing. I think it's going to have a little hiccup. It's going to be a lot of paperwork too, by the way. Welcome to special ed.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
It helped very much. Thank you.
Yeah, when I send the link, I would look at, and you're not going to like how long the Rule 2229 is. I mean, it is difficult to get through.
You are going to send the actual rules, because what I found online, the section 2223 is not the section that you presented, so it's obviously been changed. So
yeah, I will get back on their webpage to find it, but yeah, I went through and it's hidden on a different page, and God forbid you use your down arrow, because then you go to a completely different page.
All right, well, I appreciate if you send us the real goods here on that, so that I can forward it around to Colleen and Meg.
Okay, you have another.
Yeah, sorry. Who is it?
It's Chris.
Chris, okay. Chris, I recognize you.
Thanks, Ray. Just follow up to Meg's question. What I heard you say earlier, Dina, is that an independent school that is not approved for special education forfeits tuition, public tuition dollars. But what I'm hearing now is there's actually a scenario, potentially feasible scenario, where an independent school enrolls a student, provides general education, might provide some portion of special education services required, and collaborates and coordinates with the SU to ensure the delivery of the balance. Did I hear that right?
No, so if you don't mind, I'll clarify it. So currently there is an approval process. So for example, when the village school in North Bennington went through its formation, part of what they did was they presented to the State Board of Ed under what are the current rules now, probably modified a little bit here and there. And they laid out how they sought approval in all 12 categories of disabilities that fall under the IDEA. Most independent schools don't do that, by the way. The village school at North Bennington did it. I believe Burton, St. Johnsbury, and I'm gonna blank on the other one. So your traditional, very old independent schools that used to.
Linden Institute.
It may be them as well. Yep. So currently there's a process that existed up until what is going to get changed July 1st, 2023 about the special ed process, where an independent school could make the decision whether or not they wanted to seek special ed approval. That's a whole sort of kind of throwing that out. As of July 1st, 2023, in order to be able to get public school tuition, independent schools have to be open to the enrollment of students who have disabilities, okay? And that's the whole big change, right? There is the exception I talked about where there is the whole process if they don't think they can serve the child. But currently, right now, an independent school that hasn't sought approval to provide services to a student for OHI, for, which is other health impairment, by the way. So a student who may have ADHD, I'll use that one. Southwest Vermont cannot place a student there through an IEP because they're not approved for special ed. There's a prohibition currently that you cannot place students in schools, independent schools that are not approved for special ed. Public schools are considered to be approved, obviously, for all disability categories. They don't have to go through the same thing. So I want to make sure that you understand that's what the process is right now. The process as of July 1st, 2023 is an independent school could say, we don't need Vermont public tuition dollars. So we're not going to go through and say that we're going to let in students who have special needs. But if an independent school as of July 1st, 2023 wants to be able to access and have students who enroll who come with public tuition dollars attached to them, they're going to have a system of providing special ed services, whether they hire the staff, whether they contract with vendors, whether or not they come to an agreement that we provide people or we contract with vendors, however it goes under those four. Does that sort of clear it up a little bit?
Especially that very last bit, that does clear it up. So I guess my question is, what should this group do between now and July 1st, 2023 to make sure we collectively have a system to serve every student?
Well, I think each independent school.
I think make that a little bit more pointed. Does one thing that seems to me that's not clear is, do they have to apply for all 12 categories, or can they pick and choose categories and still accept students in those categories and meet this requirement?
The categories are gone. So
the categories are gone. Okay.
In the sense of, so it's either you take special ed students, you have to admit special ed students.
So you're going to take them in every category.
You're going to at least take them, yes, provisionally. And then it's the process of whether or not, in fact, you can serve them. The issue about what you all should do, I don't represent any everybody other than the board that's in the SU, is that I would think hypothetically that your board of directors or board of trustees are going to have a conversation about whether or not the receipt of public tuition dollars is important to your operating budgets and your existence. And if so, how are you going to structure the fact that you do have to provisionally accept the student without regard, remember, to you can't be discriminate against them for being disabled, right? And then the process lays out, the IEP team meets, then there's a discussion about whether or not, in fact, the student can be served in your school. Right. If the discussion is, we think the student can, but hey, we have to hire an SLP to come in and do services, then you go and you hire an SLP. The first step is, quite frankly, is that your board of trustees has to figure out whether or not you need public tuition dollars. And then everything rolls from that. And so other than that, I'm a little uncomfortable because I don't represent you guys. And so I would say, I think it's Visa, right? The Vermont Independent School Association. They probably can help. Millmore was involved in negotiating these rules, the special ed rule. Actually, all of them, but definitely the special ed rule.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, they have to apply and go through a process with AOE for all 12 categories, but the actual situation where a particular student would be determined by her IEP team, and there may be circumstances where that team may say that even though you qualified yourself, this student will not be best served at your institution, correct?
99% yes. So yes, 99% yes. But the difference is that they don't have to go in and they do have to demonstrate how, as I said, part of their application or the renewal for all the schools that we're talking about, right, they have to demonstrate how they would be, how their system is designed to help serve special students who have special needs.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other question on that topic? Because I think it's vague. It's more or less clear in my mind, but
I'm sorry. I'm
asking the questions because I have some experience asking questions about this, although I've never been in these IEP meetings, but I had to deal with this before.
Correct.
Tina, I do have another question, Colleen, from South Shore. So we had a student this year who the IEP team recommended that the best placement was for him to be at South Shire, but they had to rescind the IEP or and no services were offered. It sounds like that shouldn't have happened until July of next year.
So I can't answer that question for you because that's delving into I think a legal point, and I apologize for that, but I'm not comfortable answering that question.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's fine. I get it. I just want to be very, very mindful of sort of
the I ask these questions to them? Who do I ask the question of?
I would say that I would talk to the director of special or student services of whatever SU it was. And then I'm sure they'll reach out to their lawyer.
Yeah. So you may be involved again. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dina.
Okay. I appreciate and I'm sorry if I confused everybody. It is a lot, and it's.
Well, no, I don't think you confused us. I think you clarified a lot of things, and I do appreciate that. And that's why I invited you for two reasons, because I wanted to understand that when these rule changes occurred, and if they really meant what they were saying and how they meant it. And I think you've at least given us a good background on that. And I appreciate it very much.
Not a problem. It was very nice talking to you all. Thank you, Ray, for having me come.
Thank you, Dina.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Dina.
So I'm going to move off the superintendent's report to the chair's report. And basically, I have one item to deal with there. I'll reiterate what we're trying to do with our building this summer. One thing is to update the fire alarm system. And we've had 3 proposals, and the least expensive one to us, presented to us, was by Alarms Unlimited, Shaftesbury, Vermont, and we need to agree to accept their proposal, so that which also includes providing them an advance. I believe they want half due upon acceptance. So this proposal is for all labor and materials to install new firelight, fire alarm panel, firelight remote annunciator. I don't know if I really need to read all this. System, sensor horns, strobes, and other devices as needed. And salvage what existing detection devices and wiring are feasible to salvage and there will be permits, final acceptance, inspection, and all other work to be completed by Alarms Unlimited. Represents that it'll take 2 weeks to complete, with service out for 2 days, which it certainly will coordinate with Tim Newbold about those outages and getting access to the school.
Do we have an anticipated start date on that at all, Ray? Once we,
I think in July sometime.
Okay.
But he worked that out with Tim. And the labor and materials for this contract is $8,750. There, he notes an annual monitoring fee of $264, but we won't. We'll pay that next fiscal year, whereas we will have to pay an advance on this contract this fiscal year in order to get started. So.
Ray, I did have one question. So the response about if the fire alarms, if the code sort of changes, was the response that they see no changes in the near future, comma, or but? If that does happen,
this will meet all the codes.
Right.
That's all you can deal with. And he doesn't there's no anticipation that I forget the scenario that was brought up. Matt's
it was like
here.
A wireless thing. It was in the email.
Like a smart system. No, there's
correct.
no anticipation that that's what's going to be required in your future.
Okay.
I appreciate. I'll make the motion that we accept this contract and that we provide a half payment for the contractor.
Okay. I'll second that.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. Whatever. Thank you. So that's passed, and that includes provision for me to tell Jim Kosis to cut us a check and the treasurer to approve it for what's half of that, 375 plus 443.75. All right. As I said, there are some other things we need to try to get done this summer, and the biggest one I can think of is trying to deal with the draining issue on the west side of the building and at the entrance to the school from the west. And I don't have any contractor input on that as yet. So that's what we'll be doing this summer. And given that, I have nothing else to say about, there's no other business that I'm aware of. So. Thank you.
I just
Yeah.
have one question, Ray.
Yes, Laura.
Will you be holding a Prudential Committee meeting in July?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
I will be signing I will be signing warrant, obviously, and signing for the disbursement of the funds for the bond and bond interest. And payment to you for minutes. Any other bills that we have as well, but we will have a tuition payment due to the village school in July. Okay. Anybody that's on this Zoom who has a comment or interest, I'll use my other for that.
I didn't know if we should use Mr. Newbold's time now to ask about the air quality grant and project, or should we do that at another time?
I think we can do it at another time.
Okay.
Unless Tim was raring to speak to us about it.
I really don't have that much to report at this time. So
okay. Thanks.
We're in the early stages.
Okay. All right. So I'll declare us adjourned. Thank you very much for attending. I appreciate the attendance of Colleen and Meg and other members of the South Shore community here.
Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.